Okay, welcome everyone. This is the Introduction to Nomenclature 3.0 webinar put on by Past Perfect Software. I am Brian Gomez. I'm the Vice President of Operations for Past Perfect Software Company, and I want to thank you for coming to our webinar today. I have two polls to launch here. The first poll I want to launch to get a little bit of feedback on is I want you to tell me about your experience with webinars. So let me launch that poll. I'll share these results with everyone so you can kind of see how your classmates are new to this technology or not so new to this technology. And then I'm going to share the results with everyone. And you'll see that only about 20% of you are new to webinars, and that half of you, or I'm sorry, a quarter of you also feel like you're kind of a pro at this. And that's a huge change over the last few years. Doing online webinars training is, we've been doing it for a few years now, but in the first days it was helping everyone understand what it is that we were doing. So which nomenclature do you use now? No nomenclature, revised nomenclature, that's nomenclature 2.0, or the new nomenclature, that's the green book one, nomenclature 3.0, or you don't know. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and close the poll and then share the results. I think Sarah's going to find this number pretty interesting. The number of people that are using nomenclature 3.0 up in the 37th percentile is actually higher than I expected. It says something about the group of people we have signed up for this class. So let's see if we can get Sarah on the line here. Sarah, can you hear me?
Yes, hi.
All right, hey, Sarah. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and hide our results here and start the introduction. So this webinar that we're presenting today came out of a session that was planned for the most recent AASLH conference. And as soon as Sarah and I met and started talking about this concept of how past perfect users are supposed to migrate to the new nomenclature, it became obvious that we had a bigger audience than what we could possibly meet with at ASLH. So we decided to put on a webinar to do that. We've had nearly 200 registrations for this webinar and are excited to start this conversation. Like I said, I'll be moderating, trying to summarize the questions as we go. I'm thrilled to introduce our presenter today, Sarah Kapelish. Sarah's the registrar for the Wisconsin Veterans Museum. She's a 7-year veteran herself of Past Perfect, and she's helped several organizations migrate to the nomenclature 3.0 and has even written a guide about the subject. Most importantly, for this conversation, Sarah is one of the 11 members who make up the nomenclature committee for AASLH, and she joins us now. So Sarah, take it away, and I'll chime in when I have things to add.
Okay, great. Thanks, Brian. I'm so excited that so many people were able to come out and join us to talk about nomenclature today. Basically, what I'm going to be doing is giving kind of a brief introduction to museum nomenclature more generally, and then I'm going to talk a bit about the changes from revised nomenclature or nomenclature 2.0, depending on what you call it, to nomenclature 3.0. We're going to talk a little bit about why museums and your institutions should use standardized museum nomenclature, just some of the functions and how it works. And then I'm going to show you the website that you can go to, which is the website for the AASLH Nomenclature Committee. And you can go there to get help and support in using nomenclature. And just as a little caveat, this is going to be nomenclature more generally and not as specific to Past Perfect, but feel free to ask your Past Perfect questions as needed. So what is museum nomenclature? Basically, it's an established, consistent, and structured way to name museum objects. It's a controlled list. It's the way that the field has agreed to name and call their pieces by the same thing. It's structured so that users can easily find appropriate terms, and it's organized in a classification system with hierarchies so that you can add varying levels of detail. Probably most important, though, is it's a data standard intended to assure that you can find what you're looking for and that your computer can find the object names that you're looking for to connect to a piece. Museum nomenclature is a function-based system of naming and classifying human-made objects. There are some terms within Nomenclature 3.0 that can be useful in naming things like natural history or ethnographic collections, but it's pretty limited. Museum nomenclature is mostly intended for those man-made objects that serve specific functions within society and in our daily lives. There are other systems available for naming different types of collections. One example would just be the Integrated Taxonomic Information System. So what is Nomenclature 3.0? Basically, it is just the third edition of Robert Chenell's system for naming and classifying man-made objects. The first edition came out in 1978. The second edition, or the revised, or if you're using Past Perfect, it's 2.0, came out in 1988. And then the third edition, the Green Book, came out in 2010. It is integrated into Past Perfect 4 and 5. And Brian, did you want to talk about how Past Perfect's integrated nomenclature?
Yeah. From the start there, we had Past Perfect built into. We had the nomenclature, better known in Past Perfect speak as the lexicon. We had it built into Past Perfect 2.0, our original release of the software in 1998. It might be lore, but I believe we actually are the people that took it out of print and actually sat somebody down and had them type up all of those terms. So we created the first digital copy of that nomenclature, if the lore is correct. If you're using version 2, version 3, or version 4 of our software, you have Nomenclature 2.0, better known as the revised nomenclature, built into your software. The one thing about the revised nomenclature that actually Sarah brought up, which I think is going to come up in a little bit later in our presentation, is that we have a past perfectized version of that nomenclature, and I'll touch on that a little bit later. For people who are using version 5 of our software, Nomenclature 2, or the revised nomenclature, the old nomenclature as we call it, is still installed in your software, and by default, it is the active nomenclature if you came from version 3 or 4 to version 5. You actually have to change a setting to use the new nomenclature. It's free, but we didn't want to scare everybody when they first went to version 5 from version 4. So we'll show you a little bit more about how to do that either later today or at a later webinar. But that's how Past Perfect came installed with these different nomenclatures. Just back to you, Sarah, here. This Nomenclature 3, and looking at these 10 categories of function, they look really, really similar to what we saw in Nomenclature 2.
Right. Really, the only differences from 2.0 to 3.0 as far as these 10 categories of function are. In Category 1, under the revised, it was called Structures and is now Built Environment Artifacts. In Category 2, which is now Furnishings, it used to be Building Furnishings. Those are really the main differences. Also, you're going to often see Tools and Equipment, also T&E, so that's important to recognize. T&E is really just shorthand for Tools and Equipment. And then finally, when you are working in Past Perfect, you will see an 11th category. This is called Natural History. Past Perfect includes this for including terms for naming biology, geology, and paleontology collections, and those are areas that Nomenclature 3.0 and Museum Nomenclature kind of leave out. So museum collection records are most useful if objects are named consistently. Consistently cataloged records facilitate the sharing of data. Sharing information is really a lot easier when all of our museums can speak the same language and understand that a shoe is always a shoe, regardless of where you are. So really, nomenclature is just most important for sharing data with each other. So why should you use Nomenclature 3.0? Well, first, it's easy. It's integrated into Past Perfect 5. Alphabetical and hierarchical search options. It's formatted very, very similarly to the book. So you can use the nomenclature book hand in hand with your database. You can also use it to name all types of collections. For archival type collections, you might need to add a term for an archival lot or a collection or a grouping to your lexicon. Otherwise, you might have to select generic terms such as documents or paper, personal, but there are terms for archival collections. Also, there are terms under Category 10 for fragments and unidentified objects, which should be called artifact, unidentified. Generally speaking, nomenclature is usable in some sense, even if it's a little more broad for all types of your museum collection.
We at Past Perfect, one of the things we try to preach to our clients is that following a nomenclature or an authority file to get that data consistency is really, really important. It allows you to do a lot of things in the future, whether it's combining data, because everyone's using a like series of terms, it makes researching that combined data easier, or whether it's just using some sort of an authority file so that you just make sure that the spelling and the capitalization are the same, so you don't have to search for all of the different permutations of how things are phrased, spelled, or capitalized.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Brian. One of the biggest problems, and it's so silly that I've found with data cleanup, is spelling mistakes and people adding words to their lexicon and they're spelled 3 or 4 different ways when the actual correct spelling is already in there.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So your next slide here has some numbers on it.
Yep. So basically, Nomenclature 3.0 includes over 5,000 additional terms from the revised version. These will all be included in your Past Perfect lexicon if you've selected to use Nomenclature 3.0. It is extremely rare, and I do a lot of cataloging, that I cannot find an appropriate object name when I'm cataloging now, which has been super helpful. Now, this slide is just going to give us some examples of those new terms. Filter, coffee. There was actually no term in the revised nomenclature for a coffee filter. You would have had to add it to the lexicon, or you would have had to include it perhaps as part of a coffee pot. Cap, baseball would have been called just a cap. There was no baseball to signify what kind of cap it was. There was no term listed for a cigarette. The closest thing would have been a cigar. The term pump was listed in the lexicon, but there was nothing to describe it with the function of a gasoline pump specifically. There were terms in the revised lexicon, revised nomenclature for patches and badges and pins, but now the term insignia has been added to describe status symbol more effectively. And finally, the term overalls was added. There are also a lot of new terms for more contemporary history type artifacts as you start to see those things coming into your collections. Do note that we are still using the inverted order of terms, so rather than a digital camera, it would be camera, digital. Another thing for examples like the game, handheld, electronic. Well, I know this is a Game Boy, so what you can do is you can use the term game, handheld, electronic as the object name, and then in other name field or a title or a descriptor field, you can put Game Boy. Some terms have also switched categories in order to provide greater clarity into their intended function. A couple of examples of this are a Christmas tree ornament. Christmas tree ornaments were formerly listed under the category of communication artifact and the subcategory of art. This has been moved to the classification ceremonial artifact subclass holiday objects. So holiday objects really describe the function of a Christmas tree ornament much better than just art. The whirligig was previously listed in art and has been moved to toys under the category of recreational artifacts. Now, if the whirligig was still serving, say, a folk art function, what you can do is you could name it artwork or carving or whimsy, and then assign it either in the other name field, a title field, or you can give it the second object name of whirligig, whatever you need to do to cross-index. A couple examples of just some changes from revised to 3.0. Beads, rosary is now rosary. It represents the whole rosary rather than just the beads on the rosary. The correction to ball, soccer, and then picture, scrimshaw. Scrimshaw has been added as a tertiary object name, and we'll talk about tertiary and secondary object names in a little bit. But it's a tertiary object name under the secondary object name carving and the primary term sculpture. So it still kind of falls into an art-like category, but it's much more descriptive.
All right. So the question that I see on the board here, and I think it comes from Kim, if you're using version 4, can you convert our lexicon to Nomenclature 3.0? And the short answer for that is no, you can't. In Past Perfect version 4, when we brought that software out, I believe it was in 2005 or 2000, maybe 4 even, this new nomenclature and the structure of the new nomenclature wasn't even conceptualized yet. So we didn't have the ability to build that infrastructure into our software. So version 4 does not and will never have the ability to have nomenclature 3.0. So Past Perfect version 2, 3, and 4 will always be revised nomenclature without the new nomenclature. That said, if there are terms that you want to use from the new nomenclature and you want to put them into your old nomenclature, you certainly can do that. The classifications you assign them to will not be maintained when you move to version 5, but it will be successful. It will be a good thing to do if you are going to use those new terms like, well, 2 C's in soccer ball. There's a lot of other questions out there. I'll interrupt again here in a little bit, but
and just another thing with Kim's question, in other places that I've worked, we didn't have the money necessarily to switch over to Past Perfect 5 right away, and I did start using the terms from Nomenclature 3.0. When I did finally go in and convert to Past Perfect 5 and 3.0, the cleanup, having used terms that were already in Nomenclature 3.0, it was really, really easy. It was so helpful to start using it right away. Okay, so Nomenclature 3.0, it can't include all of the possible terms, but it's intended to be more of a flexible framework for classifying artifacts, and we try to allow you to accommodate specialized terms. So while 3.0 really encourages the use of a controlled lexicon term for the object name, you can always add your local terms in the other name and title fields. You can add terms to your lexicon if you need to within the structure of 3.0. If you can't find an appropriate object name, if one doesn't exist, always check first. But it is flexible, and you can include your terms within the structure of 3.0. Another reason to use it is you don't have to be a content expert to assign object names. You can assign general or more specific object names based on your knowledge of the artifact being cataloged. For example, if you only know that a shoe is a shoe and that a shoe is footwear, what you should do is you should assign the object name of shoe. Now, if you know the more specific type of shoe, such as a pump, you can assign it the object name of shoe, comma, pump. Past Perfect will autofill the rest of the hierarchy of the lexicon for you automatically, and we're going to show you some examples of that in a little bit. Now, if you don't have any idea of what an object is or what the function of the object is, you can still catalog it. What you would do is you would select the object name of artifact unidentified. So then it's cataloged and it's organized, and then at some point later you can have your curator or a contact expert come in and tell you what it is, and you can add the term later. So the hierarchy has been expanded in 3.0 to include secondary and tertiary object names, all of which have been added into Past Perfect in 3.0. So for example, the term shoe would be a primary object name, and then shoe, comma, pump is a secondary object name under the primary object name of shoe. Now this is one thing that Past Perfect organizes a little bit differently from the book. Brian, I didn't know if you wanted to mention that.
Yeah, this is, I think, where we saw yesterday when we were talking about this this slide, that we saw that revised nomenclature actually does list 4 levels: category, classification, subclass, and object term, where if you look in Past Perfect version 2, 3, and 4, what you'll see is so category, subcategory, and then object term. And the reason we were able to do that is because categories didn't have classifications that had some terms in them but also had subclassifications. So what we did is we combined classification and subclassification. So for instance, instead of having a clothing classification and then a subclassification called clothing footwear, we just skipped having the classification of clothing and used the clothing footwear as our subclass. So we have a 3-level system in Past Perfect version 2, 3, and 4, where the big navy blue book from Chanel's nomenclature would normally prescribe 4 there. And I think it's a really interesting concept here, and we were involved pretty early on when when we started talking about creating a new nomenclature in what that new structure was going to look like. And the reason this can all work is that every object name is unique, that you don't have the same term sitting in two different classifications. And that's a big difference from the old revised nomenclature to the new nomenclature. Before, you had print, space photographic in both art and documentary artifacts. Now you don't. It's one of the two. It's in one place in the new nomenclature. So maybe we can go on a little bit more about that.
So this next slide is just an example of the expanded hierarchy versus the hierarchy from revised nomenclature. You see a cabinet is the primary object name. Cabinet, kitchen would then be a secondary object name, and cabinet, Hoosier is the tertiary object name. So in Past Perfect 5, you should select the most specific object name that is appropriate based on your knowledge of the piece, so cabinet, Hoosier, if you knew that. You may use a secondary or a tertiary term as your object name, which would show up in like that first catalog record. And then what happens is within the lexicon tab, Past Perfect will autofill the whole rest of the hierarchy. So if you've used the term cabinet, Hoosier, when you look in your lexicon tab, it's going to automatically fill cabinet, kitchen, cabinet, storage and display furniture. It's going to autofill everything. So, and then if you were using the revised nomenclature, basically all you knew is that this was a kitchen cabinet, cabinet, kitchen, under furniture in the category of furnishings. You couldn't get any more specific as you were describing and naming the object other than cabinet, kitchen. Nomenclature 3.0 identifies that more than one object name can be assigned and associated with artifacts as they serve more than one function. So here's two examples of that. We have a commemorative paperweight and also a souvenir T-shirt. Now, every preferred term is unique and assigned to one place in the classification hierarchy, but more than one term may be used to describe a single artifact, which makes cross-indexing and searching easier. So this next slide is just going to show an example within Past Perfect of classifying that commemorative paperweight. So for the first object name, we use the term paperweight because a paperweight is always going to be and serve the function of a paperweight. It may not always be a documentary artifact, but as you can see, for object name 2, we've included the term commemorative under memorabilia and documentary artifacts so that we've really identified all of the functions of the paperweight. So when we search, we can find it as a paperweight under tools and equipment for communication or under communication artifacts. Now here is how that T-shirt would have been cataloged. So again, we're going to use the term T-shirt first when cataloging because a T-shirt is always a T-shirt. It's not always necessarily a souvenir. Now in previous versions of nomenclature, you would have had to choose the term T-shirt and perhaps ignore that it was also a souvenir. Or you may have had to add souvenir, T-shirt to your lexicon. Well, now you can just immediately give the object both of those names. Now for cross-indexing a postcard, there are a lot of naming options available. And you want to be able to include all of those object names so that you can index and find them. The Past Perfect 5 will allow you to enter up to 3 object names within the catalog record, and then if needed, you can also include additional object names under the other name field, under title, under the description field, just wherever you need to put it. And the next slide is going to show you 3 object names. So this shows that the object name for this record is postcard. You see from the top of the catalog screen. And this is how it's displayed in your lexicon tab if you've converted to Nomenclature 3.0. So you see it's been assigned the object name of postcard as well as print, photo, mechanical, as well as correspondence. Just as a quick note, there are also terms for cataloging object sets, such as set, sugar, and creamer. There's a lot more ways to name your collections within 3.0, and it tries to be more flexible and give you different object name options so that you can cross-index and search.
that other, excuse me, at the bottom of this screen here in the Nomenclature 3 subscreen, it says Other Object Names in the bottom left-hand corner there, and that is an unlimited memo field. So if you have something that's beyond this postcard that has 4, 5, or 6 official object names, I would go ahead and put them in the Other Object Names. The 3 that are here with Object Name 2, and Object Name 3, those fields are integrated into some of our search tools and others, where the other object names is not going to be quite as robust. But it's really, I think there you'll find that it's pretty rare to be assigning more than 3 names to an item.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever done it.
yeah, I would agree with that. All right, so and also don't forget that this is for using terms that are in the nomenclature. So if you have a more, and Sarah, I'm sure you have lots of things in your collection that meet this, but if you have more general names, or maybe names that are familiar to us in that trade, but no one else would know to call the thing that, or I'm thinking of like pairs of pliers or tools or specific weapons in your case, Sarah, that we would have a more general common name for them. In most of the catalogs, like objects, we have a field that's called Other Name, or the Other Name field. And that Other Name field, you can see it when you look at the other catalogs, you can see it, is a great place to put that information, as opposed to trying to classify all of those more common names of things into your nomenclature.
Right, absolutely.
There's a ton of questions on the board, Sarah. Do you want to take a few? It might feel a little bit like machine gun. It might feel a little bit like a machine gun here.
Okay.
But let's see. What about naming religious objects that are not Judeo-Christian, such as Buddhist or Sikh prayer beads?
Within Nomenclature 3.0, what you would want to do is you would want to use one of the less specific terms. I'd have to look to the book. There might even be a term, object, religion, or symbol, religious. There's something like that, and what you would want to do is you would want to use that more generic term, and then in that other name field, say specifically what the object is. You can go up as many levels as you need to, just because the screen is up. So if you had a postcard and you didn't know it was a postcard, all you knew that whatever you were cataloging was written communication T&E, you could just call it written communication T&E if you needed to. You don't necessarily have to go further down the hierarchy as you catalog.
Yeah, I think
that's a good time to use that other name field.
Yeah, I agree. I think for an organization, though, that much of their collection was made up of these more specific either social, areas of social, or even the trades area, would you recommend that they add those more specific terms to their nomenclature?
If you absolutely have to, you can. The Nomenclature Committee really wants you, to the best you can, to use the terms that are already in the nomenclature and in your lexicon. Now, if you want to add the terms, and working at a military museum, I have to do this a lot because we need to call things terms that are specific to the military in a lot of instances. Otherwise, our visitors wouldn't be able to find the pieces when they search. So what you can do then is you can add those terms within the structure of Nomenclature 3.0. So if it should be classified, if it's something that's tools and equipment for communication, for example, you can add the term but try to fit it into the structure. So make it a primary search term under writing media, under written communication T&A, and under tools and equipment for communication, just so that it still follows the structure and flow.
I know that there's 11 really, really smart people on the Nomenclature Committee, Sarah being one of them. And if I recall correctly, sort of each one of you sort of has an area of expertise that you've sort of focused in. Is that right, Sarah? As the namings, as names were added or changed?
I wasn't really involved in this edition of the book. I came on after, and right now somebody's working on like marketing and somebody's working on database programming. I'm not sure as far as the breakdown specific of naming and who worked on what.
Yeah, I sort of remember during the development of this that that sort of each one of these groups were sort of sectioned out to a person who was considered more of a subject matter expert in that area, and then the committee came back together. and then the committee came back together to make kind of sort of the final decisions. And a lot of things, as you can imagine, with all of the things that we're making every day in our world, that they're not going to be in the nomenclature. The big question is if your collection would be better served by adding these specific terms to your nomenclature, then that's probably the reason that you should go ahead and add them to the nomenclature.
Absolutely. Sorry. Oh, and then this might be a good time to bring it up. What you can do is if you need to add these terms to your lexicon, talk to some other museums that may serve similar functions and see how they're doing it, see how they're naming it. You can also send submissions of names that you think might need to be added to the next edition of nomenclature to the committee. And what we'll do is we'll look at them and say, yes, this definitely needs to be in here, or no, it probably doesn't, but we can give you ideas for ways to catalog those types of pieces.
Yeah, it's a great point. I have up on the screen now my Google Chrome browser with aaslhcommunity.org/nomenclature. We'll put a link to this on our website if it's not already there. But that will that gives you the URL to get to this page there, which maybe you can describe a little bit about what's on this website.
Yeah, so what you're looking at right now is just a little bit of an introduction to the website. If you could click on Forums, this is a really useful tool. This is where you can go in and get nomenclature news. If there's a presentation like this webinar, it would be posted here. This is where you can also ask the nomenclature committee questions. All the time we'll get messages saying, I have this, and here's a picture, what do I call it? So if you have questions that are specific to your institution, this is a great place to ask, because we want you to do whatever your institution needs to do as far as naming artifacts. But what we can do is we want to try to be as consistent as possible. So there's a very good chance another institution has already asked these questions. We get a lot of this with toy museums because it doesn't make sense for toy museums to name everything toy. It's not specific enough. They'll never find anything. So you can come in here and you can ask, and we can tell you the same things we've told other people to keep it very consistent. Here you go. How would you classify a university letter sweater?
Yeah, this is we did not plan this, so that tells you we shouldn't plan webinars. We should just do them off the cuff. But this is just a great example of how that insignia comes into play, as well as using two different names for a single item. And for those of you who were frustrated with nomenclature 2, the revised nomenclature, where you had to sort of wave your magic wand and pick which term you thought was original use and what you thought was going to be the best term to use, and you were stuck between, is it commemorative, is it not? Now you get the best of both worlds. You get to be as descriptive as you want to be and select multiple object names. So, good example there. And that forum is a useful tool. We get questions at the support office. We get questions at the support office all of the time for people wanting to know how do I name this? What is this called? And that. And we're pretty smart computer people, and we have some great museum professionals that work here at Past Perfect too. But this is not our area of expertise, and we do think that getting in touch with the committee or other members of the field is a really good idea. So I'll actually take the first one, give you a break here, Sarah. If you switch from version 3.0, I'm sorry, from the revised nomenclature, or nomenclature 2, to nomenclature 3, how does it affect your fields? The biggest thing that you'll see if you make that switch is this screen that Sarah's captured in her PowerPoint presentation will change. It goes from the blue background nomenclature 2 to the green background nomenclature 3, where you have more opportunities to enter in object names. Now, one thing that Sarah said that's true in museum cataloging but not true of Past Perfect is that you can't just put tools and equipment for communication. You do have to have at least a primary object name for that record to be saved. You can't just assign a category to it. And the object names are required, as well as classification and category. So you're going to need those 3 fields with nomenclature 3. Now, you don't have to type them in. Excuse me, I said before that the object names are unique in the new nomenclature. So as soon as you give the object name a postcard, Past Perfect looks in its database to find out what those other class, subclass, and categories are. So you don't have to do very much here. In the event that you had a different, you used a term like postcard, but it was classified in a different category and subcategory in nomenclature 2, on the bottom right-hand corner of this screen, you would see the old nomenclature classification for it, and that is still searchable in Past Perfect. We don't actually keep track of each one of these categories in the catalog record. We just keep track of the object name, whether it's at the primary, secondary, or tertiary term level, and then we look up all the places that it applies. So we can go sort of work our way backwards to going back to the book to figure out what things should be kind of linked together. And then another question that comes, another question that came across here is how does that affect the nomenclature categories? If you have made changes to your nomenclature back in, I don't know, 2003, and totally changed how the nomenclature structure worked and put in all sorts of object names that would not have been in nomenclature 2 or nomenclature 3, the answer is when you go to nomenclature 3, all of your stuff is going to be unclassified because there is no migration path to take your 3-level system and turn it into a 7-level system, not without us doing some custom conversion work. So if you've done many, many wholesale changes to the old nomenclature and you want to go to nomenclature 3 now, you're going to have some tough decisions to make. And I'd be more than happy to talk to you about it and figure out exactly what you need to do. Sarah, I don't know if you're going to know this one or not, but what's the difference between a photograph and a print photographic? Which is better for cataloging a photograph?
If it's just a photograph, like you picture a photograph, I would call it a photograph. If you know that it's a photomechanical print, then I would categorize, classify it as print, photomechanical. That probably doesn't entirely answer the question, but they're slightly different.
A question.
Generally speaking, because I'm not a content expert. Generally, with these things, I go a little bit more broad than specific when I do my cataloging because I'm not a content expert in anything. So I would go photograph.
I see. Yeah. When I do the regular training for Past Perfect, the thing I always try to remind people is that even if you're not 100% perfect, as specific as you need to be with your object names, good descriptions go a long way to making up for that. Because when people come in to do keyword searching, they may not know to do print, space, photographic. But when they go into do a keyword, they might be looking for a photograph of John Smith. And if you have in your database that this photograph was taken of John Smith in 1932, those keywords are still going to come up with to bring up your record. So Michael Nagy brings up a great question. Where are the born digital objects? Man-made but not physical. You know anything about this, Sarah? I've heard this question before, and I don't know the answer.
I don't know. I'd have to maybe ask the committee. I haven't heard anything about that.
Yeah, I would agree. This is we're constantly evolving. Technology is moving really quickly, so I think we're going to continue to have great questions like this, and we don't even know what the next thing is going to be called. Taxidermy. Have you encountered this one where you have a mount of, say, a specimen's head, and how would you use nomenclature 3.0 to deal with that?
This is one of the tricky ones. I don't think there is really a term for those types of collections. I would add something generic, taxidermy, and then really include a good descriptor. I believe there are other systems of classification, however, out there that might be more appropriate for that type of material, just like there are systems that are better for classifying ethnographic or natural history collections. I'm pretty sure there is a system for actually cataloging and naming taxidermy-type pieces.
Yeah,
Well, if you have something in your 11 category.
Yeah, this is the place where I think it could easily go. I mean, most of our natural history area is focused on geology right now, but clearly this is where you could start adding your primary names to the either the species or even to a common name. So I would go with using two names because you don't want to catalog lions, but you might want to catalog a mount of a lion, which would give it two names. And one would be a taxidermy mount, and the other would be the species. So again, a good description would help too, but having those two different names assigned to the item would be good. What does it take to register at the forum website? I saw that question there. I actually don't know the answer to that. Is there a registration that you have to do? Oh yeah, it looks like it.
you have to become a member for it. Maybe from the home you can set up a login. It's been a while since I've had to do this, but
well, there's a register button right here that probably gets you registered for the forum. Is there any charge to that, Sarah?
Nope, it's free.
Cool, part of the AASLH community. So you can sign up right there, and you'll be able to post. Now, even without being a member, I'm not registered. I'm definitely not logged in. If I am registered, I probably am from a while ago. But even if you're not registered, you can still go look. There's it's just I think when you go to post that they want you to be registered.
Right. Yeah. If you want to submit to the forums, you need to be registered.
So a sticky question
here. But otherwise,
here.
The rest is accessible.
Yeah, cool. A sticky question I see on the board here, and one that I want to address is, do you help us rename our items? Past Perfect, we had to make a pretty tough decision when people started talking about, look, we're going to change this name to become a new name in the nomenclature. And for instance, the soccer ball. And the soccer ball is kind of a bad example because it's a spelling error. But something else where the soccer ball would actually now be called a football ball or something like that if that was indeed to happen. We had a tough decision to make whether we would create an automated process to allow it to happen, that we would just take whatever you named it and say, look, you must have meant this because the nomenclature committee is really smart and they're right. We abandoned that idea and decided that it would be much better to not rename your artifacts because if we do it wrong or we didn't understand what you were going for and take, that the nomenclature said that became this, and you were using that word, I don't know, tack, to mean something different, then we would end up renaming things that you thought of a thumbtack as a tack, and we were thinking of it as a horse saddle as tack, and therefore your thumbtack would become a horse saddle. And we thought that would be kind of a bad idea politically. So we made the decision not to make those kind of changes. However, there are tools, and we're not going to have time to cover this today, and we'll have to come back to doing a lexicon webinar in the not-too-distant future. But there are tools in Past Perfect that allow you to make these transitions a lot easier with global updates or renaming objects in mass or using authority files. So I'll try to come back to this hopefully in the next 30 days to give another opportunity for really implementing the stuff into Past Perfect. So we are short on time here. I'm going to try to hit a couple of other questions. Sandy, I believe you're in Kentucky, Sandy. Please clarify your response on converting 3 to 3.0 from 2.0. If you've created some new object names in 2.0, does your entire database become unclassified or just the object names that are not recognized in 2.0 or 3.0? Let me see if I can make it really clear. If you had a SOCKER ball in your collection, and it was in the proper order, ball, comma, space, SOCKER, and you convert to nomenclature 3, your SOCKER ball will go from being part of sporting equipment to being unclassified. If you added a term to your database because you saw soccer was misspelled and you have ball, comma, space, soccer in nomenclature 2 classified, when you convert to nomenclature 3, it will go to the right place because all it's doing is looking at that object name and deciding whether or not it is a term that's in the big green book. So any terms that you added that are in the big green book will be they will be assigned to their appropriate category, subcategory, and even defined to their tertiary terms.
Since we have so many nomenclature users, I think it might be helpful to very quickly show them where our help manual is, because that really provides answers to most of these questions. So that might be something people could use later.
Yeah, good point. So here at the nomenclature website, we start from here?
Yep, it's under tutorial.
Okay, so we go to tutorials here on the main page.
Now in here, you're going to find longer versions of introductions to nomenclature, basically. But if you scroll down a little bit, here is a PDF help guide specific for past perfect users converting from 2.0 to nomenclature 3.0. It's going to give you all sorts of information as far as what to expect in the conversion, what you can do to make it easier, things that might turn out to be problems for you, and then it also walks you through really specific examples of common issues people are facing. And this is totally free, so you can click on it and get the PDF.
So that's at aaslhcommunity.org/nomenclature, and then click on the tutorial button. And that will get you halfway down the screen, you'll find it there. Last question that we'll take here from the board, and know that we're going to look through these questions as soon as we get off the phone and we get done with this this webinar today, and we will base a future webinar. Sarah's across the office here looking at me saying, "Oh my God, we got to work on this." So we'll come back to this, and we'll come at this next webinar about the lexicon based on these questions, maybe more of a roundtable type format. So watch our newsletter and watch your email for that opportunity to come up. The last question I see here from Kathy is there a charge to switch to nomenclature 3.0 when you have Past Perfect version 5? And the answer is no. When you bought Past Perfect version 5, you bought the licensing and everything you needed to have nomenclature 3.0 in your Past Perfect software. It's there waiting to be used if you're ready to move to it. If you do move to it and you decide, you know what, this is not what I was hoping for, I want to be back at the old nomenclature, no problem. You just go and you switch it back. So, well, Sarah, thank you so much for taking your time out to help us today, and for all of the great feedback we got from the group. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Nope, you're welcome, and thanks so much for having me.